Today's guest is Justin Beyers, and he heads up research and development at Benuti Technologies. And this conversation today will be covering what they're doing with one of their products called UVCeed, which is essentially one of those UV lights that you can hover around and disinfect with. But there's a twist. It's got AI and it's also looking out for you to make sure you don't get hurt in the process of using one of those. Believe it or not, that hadn't been taken into consideration yet. Then another product that he'll dive into is Realeve, which is a neural implant, if you will. It's a neuromodulation implant, I should say. I correct myself there. And the implications, the ramifications of what it can do moving forward into the future for anyone struggling with like cluster headaches, which was its inception as part of the design, to eventually strokes, and what it can do to get past the blood-brain barrier. All those things are going to be absolutely instrumental as things move forward, as the world continues to evolve. We're getting data points that we never had access to, where now we can hover this magic wand that disinfects something, right? We're getting data points and devices that can control and make it so that, I don't know, we don't have a stroke. We can probably solve dementia now. The implications of what we're going to be able to learn about, the development of it, some of the challenges with developing products like that. For any people who are looking to get into medical device startups, you're going to be able to borrow from his wisdom, from his experience, the hard-won lessons. This is something you're going to want to listen to. And overall, it's just a really awesome conversation. And I think you will enjoy this, because I definitely did. And as usual, it felt very natural, very organic, and really, there's nothing much else to say other than he's also just a super awesome guy. So without further ado, Justin Beyers of Benuti Technologies. All right. Oh man, what an absolute pleasure to have you here. Justin, it really is one of those things where I don't often get a chance to talk to somebody in the medical technology space, and that sort of where it intersects that way. And while I don't want to start it off immediately there, what I will say is what made me even more intrigued is I hear you're a motorcycle enthusiast above all things. You know what I mean? And for me, this is kind of cool, because then I keep going through the notes and I see you're an inventor at the same time. So I'm like, all right, hold on. This is a renaissance man. So I got to ask, man, what was it like to like step into the world and say to yourself, I'm going to invent things and then ride motorcycles off into the distance?
Yeah, but I mean, I think everybody secretly loves motorcycles, right? I
This is
mean,
true.
there's something great about, I recently got rid of that one, but for a while, I had a Harley Nightster with a single seat, and there's something about getting on a vehicle that no one can get in there with you, and no windshield. And I had mine pretty much all stripped, so it was just engine and gas tank and you get out on the road, and there's that real connection. And I always like that, because it allows me, a lot of time to think.
Yeah.
I always sort of enjoyed the being creative, and I don't think that anyone ever sets out to be an inventor. I always had a drive or an enjoyment of sort of tearing things apart and knowing how things work. So when I left high school, I decided I was going to go into engineering. So I got a background in electrical engineering and computer science. I went to work at a big Fortune 500 company. I went to work at Motorola, and I was on a team that did the GM OnStar system. So when the OnStar system was originally introduced, it was an analog cell phone. I was on the team that created the first digital OnStar system, and it was fun. It was neat to design something where we made. I think we were making, millions and millions of units every year. But the big Fortune 500 companies, they sort of operate like a ship, and when you start working with startups and doing your own thing, to pull it sort of back, that's sort of like driving a motorcycle. Startups are fun because they're nimble, they're quick, they're fast, and you get to sort of drive it the way you want to drive it. And so I don't know if there was ever a point where I said, oh, I want to do a bunch of patent work and invent things. But what I did like is, that ability to be at a company where, if, my job is, I'm the director of research and development for Benuti Technologies. And we're this independently owned sort of think tank, if you will. Dr. Peter Benuti started us, and as a company, we have about 500 issued patents, about 300 more, pending. And so I go to work one day and we may be working on green technology and in the lab sort of playing around. And, the next day we're working on, some of the stuff we'll talk about in a little bit, cell phone accessories and, surgical implants. And, at a major company, you never sort of get that freedom. And startups, startups are the motorcycle of the business world.
I love it. Yeah, that might even be the name of this conversation, man. And as I think about it, you're right. I mean, it really is a thing. If we watch and listen to the way things progressed, I mean, we went so far back as to when Motorola was making OnStar. That takes me back, right? And now we're in a world where we don't have to, and excuse me for the language, we don't have to not know about what's happening in our world anymore, right? So, for example, with UVCeed, this is like AI powered disinfectant platform, right? Work, home, school. From what I'm seeing in the notes, we don't have to know that what our environment is. We don't have to not know what our environment is like right now. We actually have real time data with the tech that you're building.
And so,
I like to start there.
UVCeed is a fun project. As I mentioned, we're sort of a medical, think tank, medical R&D. But as a lot of people, experienced during the COVID lockdown, everybody got shut at home.
Yeah.
And over the years, we've done a lot of really fun, sometimes crazy projects. At one point we helped design a system that welds plastics inside of the body, which also sort of is a pullback to motorcycles because it's for ulna fractures, and there's something about motorcycles and fractures that also
I wonder
to go together. But so we spent a lot of time with that and robotics and all sorts of really interesting surgical products. And then one day we all got stuck at home. And Dr. Benuti and I, he was down in Florida and I was here in Illinois. And, I think we'd talk about probably once, twice every day, during the shutdown period, because we work a lot together. And there was I think we both were sort of following, everything that was happening. And, even though we weren't at the office, business has to keep moving. Both of us had purchased at one point one of those UV sanitizing wands that were sort of popular, and we both got it home, and both of us said the same thing, is that these are just impossible or almost crap to use, because the science behind UVCeed is very established. UV light breaks the bonds in the DNA and RNA of the viruses and bacteria. That part is a given. I think the science community buys it. I mean, it's proven. But the problem with a lot of the products out there is that the way that it disrupts it is you need a certain amount of energy. If you don't put enough energy in it, it's not going to disrupt the DNA bonds, and it doesn't work. And so these products were coming out during COVID, and you would just sort of wave it across the table. And we didn't think it was easy to use. You don't know how long are you supposed to hold it in one spot? Do I know where you have cleaned? Because really what you're trying to do is you're trying to clean, you're trying to kill an invisible object with an invisible light. And you can't visualize that. You can't do that. So, we were sitting around during lockdown and we said, I bet you we could do something better than this, and so, we had done a lot of work in, UV sanitation and disinfection for medical products. And so we wanted to take that, and we came up with the UVCeed device, which we the hardware we integrated, MagSafe and Bluetooth and a bunch of sensors. But what we also did, which I think was the most interesting, is we leveraged, the current technology that's out there. We took augmented reality and we took artificial intelligence, which may seem like overkill for a phone accessory, but what it allowed us to do is to create a disinfection device that, when you hop on a plane, and I travel a ton. I'm going to tell a side story, but years ago when we were working on a medical product, I was flying out to Montana State University. They got a great biofilm research lab, and during the flight, I was in the center aisle, and this lady changed a baby diaper,
Oh my goodness.
a number twosie, not a number one, a number twosie, on the tray table, and then handed me the dirty diaper to give to the flight attendant. And ever since then, I just always remember, because I fly a lot. I just remember thinking, I have eaten so many meals off of those. And I know I've seen people, open those peanut bags and they'll fall out, or the pretzels, and eat it off of there. And I know that's not the first time there's been a poopy diaper on those. But so we wanted is a little thing you could pop on your phone when you get on that plane, take your tray table down and sanitize it. And that's really where it started, with the initial concept. And then we sort of let that idea sort of simmer for a long time. And then, when we were stuck at home, we were like, okay, this is the time we have time because we're slowed down to do this. And so, using the augmented reality, what we do is we use a bunch of sensors and we calculate the distance and the light. There's a lot of math that happens. But what it allows you to do is through your phone, when you use the UVCeed device, you watch through the screen. We use the camera, and then we overlay a real-time heat map of the area that's being cleaned. So as you clean, you watch your phone, and you can see the areas go from a light blue to a green, and green is when you hit your target color, and you can sort of pull back and you can see what areas of the tray table, for example, you've cleaned. And if you've missed some, you can look and go back and treat the new area. The other thing that we did, because UV light, you shouldn't look at it. You shouldn't put it on your skin. It's not going to, cause major damage, but it does cause damage to your skin, and it can cause, burns to your eyes. So what we did that really no one else had been doing is we went ahead and pulled in some AI algorithms at the same time. So while we're doing all that augmented reality, we constantly monitor the area that's been cleaned. And we have the aperture of the light matches the aperture of the camera. So anything that's in the camera field of view is getting the light. We're not shooting the light further out. But if in that field of view, we detect, a hand or a face or a cat or a dog or anything, we turn off the light and we warn everybody. We put a bunch of sensors in. So if you move your phone back too far, because light is the further you are away, the less energy density you have. If you get too far away, UVC would still work, but it would take a really long time. It's a combination of the intensity of the light and the length of time that you have it on a single surface. So if you move it away, the intensity goes down. So you have to hold it a really long time, which, the wands can't do that. What we do is we say, hey, you're too far away, move it closer, or move it further away. And we just wanted a device that, that one originally, it was two business travelers that came up with it. But we also realized that, new parents are like it as well. When those pacifiers fall on the ground, or if you've had a kid or watched a kid and you take them to a grocery store when they're those babies, they immediately stick their mouth on the handle, no matter how many times you say, don't do that. So we wanted something you can just pull out, but something that you don't have to worry about, am I using it right or wrong? The software guides you through the entire process. And so that was a real fun project. It was really, a little bit different from what we do on a day-to-day basis here. But again, going back to the motorcycle, that's the fun thing about a startup. When you're working on something else and you have an opportunity to make a sharp turn, if you're a nimble company, you can do that and execute. If you're a huge company, the idea of saying, okay, well, one day we're designing knee implants and tomorrow we're going to make a phone accessory. That's a hard turn to make. But when you've got a company that's sort of set up like that, it's nice.
Yeah, I mean, what I like is that you were able to take something that could potentially be more, business to business and medical only and stuck in a vacuum, and you brought it over to the consumers. Were there any interesting challenges in like trying to take something that would normally be medical device only and bringing it into the consumer market? Were there any challenges you had to overcome in that
Yeah,
space?
yeah. I mean, the thing that when we designed this, it's interesting because the consumer UVC products are regulated by the EPA instead of the FDA, which is a weird
Wow.
thing that made no sense to me. But that's the way the government works. Is sometimes they have laws that not everybody understands. So the reason that is regulated that way is that the way pesticide device laws are written, which were written, I guess, in the 50s, anything that kills a pest is considered a pesticide. And so UV light has to follow the same rules as, raid, spray, or even a mousetrap.
Wow.
Which doesn't make any sense, but from years of doing medical devices, we're pretty used to dealing with the sort of government regulation. And so when we started this, we tried to approach it the same way we would approach medical device. The same design, rules, the same quality control, the same software sort of documentation. And so, when we got to that regulatory aspect of bringing that in, it was nice because there's a lot of EPA rules, but we had, even though we'd never dealt with the EPA, when we sort of got to that finish line, almost all of them had already been checked off, just because you end up starting to follow a certain pattern in your development life cycle, and for us, we didn't necessarily follow it exactly the same as if we were doing a medical implant, but we followed it if we were doing sort of a lower risk medical device, which is still a regulated device. But yeah, there's tons of problems, especially when, as we're talking, startups, not necessarily for consumers, but sort of pull back for medical. That's after doing this now for decades, that's the one thing that if any of your listeners or people who are doing startups, if you're doing a medical device or a highly regulated device, is you sort of need to understand that in the beginning. We've seen so many other companies that we've dealt with over the years that they'll do their design, they get to the end, and then they want to go to the FDA, or then they want to go to the EPA, and it becomes very hard to fix anything at the end. There's required documentation that they want to see, and to generate that when you're done is really it's really painful. And so the one sort of lesson learned, whether it was this device or welders that we've done or implants, is that you need to sort of understand that regulatory pathway from the very beginning, because if not, that's where mistakes get very, very costly very quick. You can spend, not to get overly technical, but when you do a medical device that has software, FDA expects certain software standards to be followed, and even if your software works perfectly, and there's been a few consumer devices for babies that have came out recently that had ran into this. They, even if your device is great and it clinically works, and you put it on the market, and FDA says, okay, I believe this is actually a medical device, and we're going to make you follow these medical rules. If you don't have all of that documentation in place, it can take a year to generate all that documentation. And so I've seen, news articles, and I sort of, try to stay up in the field. I've seen companies that have had to pull everything off the shelf and then generate all of this, and it's a very painful, hard lesson to learn.
I mean, yeah, you just saved people a lot of money on their car insurance by switching to some sense. No, that's 100% true. The amount of burn rate that would have occurred, and then only to find out, wait a minute, we need.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I'm just saying that would be the worst case scenario, to sit here and raise all this capital, spend all this money, only to find out, oh, we need to have all this ready before we even did any of this, because now that's going to inform our design.
If you're going on to market, if you've got a sales force now, and you have to stop all of that, that's a hard one. That's a real hard one, to do, and so, like, for us with UVCeed, what's nice is that, when we got to the finish line, we had our boxes checked. So if you go on to Amazon or you go on to UVCeed.com, you can check out the device, and we've got them for sale, and it's nice to have all of your ducks in a row, when you get to that finish line, because if not, that can break a company.
100, especially a startup. I mean, cash flow is everything, and you only have so much cash, and every day you're not making money, it's not a good day. No, 100%, man. I mean, honestly, you just dropped the gem there. And you've mentioned implant a few times. Let's get to one of the other companies and products, I should say, that you're working with here, and that is Realeve, right? If I understand correctly, it's a micro-neuromodulation system, right? So right off the bat, I'm like, but it is interesting, because from what I'm seeing, it's like stroke patients, people, brain damage, things of that nature. That's crazy. Tell me more about this.
It's very interesting. So our, the Benuti Technologies business model in the past is, we're a, sort of a think tank and incubator, and I would say 99% of the companies, our typically our model is we have the incubator, and then a company sort of spins out, even though it still lives in our incubator. It's its own entity. Most of those are our IP, our ideas from the very beginning. Relieve is slightly different because it was an acquisition. We typically don't take, Dr. Benuti and I and the other people on the team here. We're all, creative sort of inventor types, and we would sort of joke, we got a big queue of things that need to be commercialized. So we rarely, as a company, will take on external design work or bring things into the incubator. Relieve is one of those exceptions, but it's slightly different. It was initially the idea was thought of by another company, and that company made mistakes along the way and ended up going insolvent. And so we came in and purchased the assets of the company, and saw a lot of potential for the device, not just in its original indication, but in some of these other ones that you were talking about. And what our device is, it's an implant. It's about the size of an almond. It's real small, and it goes in through a small incision above your teeth here, above your sort of incisor area. And it gets implanted in the sphenopalatine ganglion, and we won't go too technical on that, but that's a nerve cluster, in your autonomic nervous system, and that nervous system, controls a lot of the things that your body does automatically. The things that you don't think about doing. Your breathing, and your a lot of it does some with pain processing and all of this stuff. And the implant was originally designed to be placed in there. It's passive, so it's powered externally, and it was originally designed to treat chronic cluster headaches. And if you're not familiar with those, they're considered what's called a suicide headache. It's supposed to be one of the worst pains known to mankind.
Wow.
So they're worse than migraines. And these patients, they just have, really no ability to have much of a functioning life if you have these. It's not an overly common disease, but for the people who have it, it's life altering. And this implant has been used in about 700 patients for treating chronic cluster headaches. And what happens is, they get the implant, and then they take a small handheld device when they feel these headaches going on, and then they place the handheld over the implant, and it powers the implant. And there's a bunch of technical stuff that happens back and forth. But what we do is we modulate. So it's a neuromodulation system, and we modulate the SPG, the sphenopalatine ganglion. And in chronic cluster headaches, what we're able to do is disrupt that pain feedback loop. And so these patients who were, had these debilitating headaches, what they're able to do with this device is they use it, and in about 15 minutes, the entire headache, it goes away. And what was amazing with the clinical trials is that it was proven that it doesn't just treat the symptoms; it actually reduces the amount of cluster headaches these patients have. And so it was a real breakthrough for these patients. And when we were able to acquire that technology and the patents around that, we jumped on it. And so we're in the process now of bringing this back to market. So it's been a big lift. It's got a custom computer chip in it, so we had to bring take them and make foundries and dice them and grind them, and it gets all welded together. It's a very complex system, with the goal of relaunching it for these cluster patients. The patients who were involved in the clinical trial that was done by the company who had originally developed it, once they found out we purchased it, it's been interesting because I get an email once a week or so about, because some of the early patients, just like a cell phone, if you've got anything with a battery, eventually it stops holding its charge.
I was going to ask, yeah.
Yeah. And so the good thing about the design is that we use wireless power, so there's nothing that gets changed in the face, but these patients from the original study are needing new handhelds. And as a company, we're working on some of the regulatory hurdles that we need to do so we can start to provide those. But it's been just amazing to hear from these patients that say, I have one of these devices and my handheld is not holding a charge anymore. I can't imagine living without this device. Will you guys support the patients that were implanted previously during the trial? And as a company, of course, Dr. Benuti's has always been very adamant about why we run this incubator is to make people's lives better. And so we want to be able to provide these replacement controllers. But at the same time, the company, we're looking at, ways to use the SPG, for other disease states. And as you mentioned, stroke, we're looking at, the ability to increase vascular flow to the brain. And this becomes important, when you have patients who have a stroke and they're going through rehab and they're going through therapy and they're working, working to get better. If you can increase the neuroplasticity or the brain's ability to sort of relearn things while they're going through therapy, we believe that it can improve the patient's outcome and possibly shorten that time. So on that one, we're not quite as far along on that one. Cluster, we're finishing up some regulatory. Those clinical trials are done. We've got 700 patients finished up, and we're in the final regulatory aspect of the cluster. But we have received recently or been involved in a philanthropic grant where we're starting to prepare to do a pilot study on patients for stroke. The data looks really good, and so we really believe that the outcome of this study will help power a larger clinical trial. The thing that also for us is amazingly interesting is there's been animal work done now that shows that modulation of the SPG or the sphenopalatine ganglion can relax the blood-brain barrier. And I know we're sort of throwing out some terms that may be not familiar, but the brain has got this really great ability to keep bad things out. So it's got this, it's called the blood-brain barrier. So, what that does is it makes sure that, if there's stuff in your system that shouldn't be in your brain, it doesn't go to your brain, which is great until you need to get stuff to your brain. So, when you've got, cancer patients or you've got, Alzheimer's patients, and you're trying to do drug delivery either, directly to the brain, or, you see sort of plaque buildup, or they're trying to get stuff out of that area. The blood-brain barrier stops that. So, there's certain types of cancers that, chemotherapy doesn't work because you can't get that medicine to the location it needs to be. And so, our next phase, where we're looking now is that, the initial animal data shows that, SPG neuromodulation can relax that blood-brain barrier. There's still a big lift, to go from animals to people. That's not a yeah, it's not an overnight thing, and nor should it be. We're as a company, our goal is to make patients' lives better, and we are very careful about how we do that. But we see a lot of promise, using the SPG modulation in areas outside of just cluster headache, so like the stroke, the blood-brain barrier, and as we mentioned, and sort of even pull back to the beginning, since we are a startup, medical startups move a little bit slower than the cell phone type startups, but we are able to sort of watch these clinical trials and say, okay, well, we sort of want to go this direction. I wouldn't go as far to say a medical startup handles like a motorcycle. Maybe it's like a Goldwing or something, a big, it's definitely not a sport bike. But we get to move a little quicker than like the big multinational medical corporations. And so, that's our goal at Realeve, is to bring this product, which has been proven in over 700 patients for cluster headache. We want to bring that back, so these cluster headache patients have treatment, and expand the indications. We hope that that we can help these patients who have either strokes or Alzheimer's, or cancers. It's not an overnight thing, but we're optimistic, and we're pushing hard to go down that path.
No, I mean, the ramifications of what you're saying immediately drive me to think of so many things that could be impacted by something like that in a very positive way, even for people with addiction, for example. I mean, I'm sure that's one of many things that's on the pipeline for it. Just as I'm hearing you say this, there are so many people who maybe are on the spectrum autistically and have emotional dysregulation. The list goes on, right? It's really awesome to hear that we're there now. We're actually in the future in that sense.
It is, it is someone who enjoys tech and follows tech, maybe I'm overly optimistic at times, but it is, it is interesting, as we're watching, companies, like Neuralink, or we're watching, some of these AI companies. We're watching, Chat GPT, as everyone is. We're all sort of watching that. But I think as a society that and again, everybody has an opinion. I definitely could be wrong, but it feels like we're at almost like an inflection point. The technology is advancing very quickly. What you can do now with AI wasn't possible 18 months ago. I recently was I took my kids to the Smithsonian this year, and we were sort of standing there looking at the Wright brothers plane, and you don't think about it a lot, but the time between when the Wright brothers did their first flight, and the time that we landed on the moon, mentally for me, that's a long time, but you're not, you're talking decades. You're not talking hundreds of years. And now, researchers, inventors, and in just consumers, we have access to tools that 18 months ago they didn't exist. And so what's going to be interesting in the next 6 months, 18 months is how you watch companies harness these tools. That's I think the thing that is going to be, as someone who likes to watch stuff, that's the most interesting part, right? AI can do so much stuff, but AI can't necessarily come up with the invention or the end use. It's as we move forward, we're going to watch companies and people and innovators take these tools and now be able to rapidly develop stuff that would have taken years or decades to do previously. And so, it should be interesting. I think that tech is at a point where we should see a real sharp rise in stuff coming out, and medicine, I think, is the same way. I mean, you start to see now, they're doing a lot more, in digital twins, and they're using, these huge AI engines to process, concepts for different drugs. I think you'll see a lot of that. I think that what will end up happening, though, is before we'll see these, you're really, you're going to have an 18 to 24 month sort of cycle, and that's not the development cycle. That's going to be the regulatory cycle. The other thing that's sort of interesting, is we're sort of a little off topic, but maybe I guess it sort of is on the startup thing, and it also ties back to the comment about, the regulatory aspect is, as you start using these new tools, it does introduce a new complication for the regulatory process.
Right.
Part of what FDA is always about is, deterministic systems, and we need to be able to verify and validate. If you're using a software tool, that I give you these inputs, how do we process it to get this output? And as you start using AI to sort of be that black box in the middle, the traditional software documentation methods don't exist anymore. If you didn't write that portion of the code, you don't have it documented.
Right.
So I think it's interesting. I mean, especially if you watch like the Apple Watches and what Apple's doing, Apple's really trying to leverage a lot of this with the, throwing the EKG in the watch, and a lot of the big tech companies, they all everybody wants to be there. I think that to watch who's going to make these changes, and is going to be fun, and hopefully, they're all, for the benefit of society. I think that, I think that's the end goal. Is if we can leverage this technology, and these new tools to make everyone's lives better. I think that'll be amazing.
I mean, I can't tell you how many times I'll sit there and wonder, what was that pain? I'll check my Apple Watch and I'll be like, oh no, my heart rate is fine. Okay. Oh, I didn't sleep. I didn't sleep enough. Oh, I closed my rings. I mean, just even having that data just to look at, to sort of calm me down so I don't jump off the ledge.
And every new update, my watch seems to yell at me for more and more of my habits. I think the new one, and I was sort of slow to upgrade, but now the biggest one I get all the time is, you're in too loud of an environment. My watch yells at me a lot.
Yeah, man. Or hey, it's time you stand up. You ever thought about maybe taking a walk?
yeah. But all of that's really interesting, and the other thing that we didn't have, before this, and I think that is the most interesting, portion of it, is that, to power all of this AI and to power all of these developments in the medical space, the real sort of secret, or the real thing you need is the data, the big data, and that's always been the battle, is how do you get that? About 24 months ago, Dr. Benuti, I mentioned him a few times. He's an orthopedic surgeon. and we did a project at Purdue University, because we had a huge data set. He does a ton of surgery, and probably one of the largest single surgeon data set on knee replacements. And I was sitting there one day and I was like, I have a data set of over 1,000 surgeries. We should do something cool with it, and so we worked on a software program that could predict the chance of you having a complication if you have a knee replacement, and then how do you adjust that, what changes can you make as a person. But it was an interesting project. We haven't necessarily commercialized that or done anything with it. It was more for internal use. But it was very worthwhile for us as a company, because it made us understand what you need to have AI, do something for you. Everybody sort of just throws out the term, "Oh, we're going to do stuff with AI." Well, for AI to accomplish anything, you need vast amount of data. And what's interesting, and we talk about, you both mentioned the watches, or we've got all this, is as a society now, with everybody being interconnected, we're slowly building this huge data set. We didn't necessarily have that. We're talking about what we didn't have 18 months ago.
I was just gonna say, yeah.
3 years ago, if you were to say, "Hey, I want to know what percentage of the population stands every so often," you'd do some surveys, and you'd try to glean that data. But now we're getting real quantifiable data. How much of the population blows their eardrums out with loud noises, or what decibel level are people experiencing. It was all things that people would try to take a small sample and then project into a bigger one. But now that everything's interconnected, we're making these huge data sets that will allow AI medical advancements, which is it's interesting. And it's always a double-edged sword, right? I mean, you now we've got people, now all of your stuff's being taken, and it's all anonymized. I'm saying people that should be concerned about, everyone should protect their own data, but when you get pooled into these big data sets, it doesn't say my name is this. It just becomes a number.
This person only stands for 2 hours.
Right. Yeah. But it's interesting because that's really what's going to drive these innovations. You've got to have the computing power. You've got to have you've got to have the software, but then you have to have the data to do something. And
they're the ingredients. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. If you're missing one, you can't make it. And we're at a point that when we wanted to do the AI, or the stuff for UVCeed, I didn't have to go out and write code that says, what is a hand? Because there are publicly available data sets of millions of hands, or and so now, programmers, innovators start to have access to these huge data sets, and I won't say 18 months, but 5 years ago, if you would want to write machine vision to detect a hand, it was complex, because it's a lot of coding involved. But now that you have, now if you want a repository of a data set of 1 million hands, you can get that. They may not be free, but that data is out there, and it accelerates the ability for innovators to accomplish things, and for and that's important when you're a startup. When the startup has, you raise money and you say, I want to accomplish this, I'm going to raise X to get there. Anything you can do to compress that timeline to get to the market is critical.
I think you dropped so many amazing gems, aside from sharing some updates on what you're doing with the products that you're putting out, from not only telling people, look, you can save yourself a lot of money by just deciding whether or not you understand what regulatory bodies are going to be involved in this, right? And getting that paperwork set up. And that should be where you start from, especially when you're in the medical device world, right? But now you're also talking about hey, make sure you understand what data may compress the amount of time, which, as you know, time is money. Like, consider those factors and build from there. Because it's cool to have the idea and, oh, I want to change the world, and it's optimistic and great. You probably can. But if you don't take these factors into consideration as a startup, you may be at a disadvantage from others who are doing that. Right. And
Correct.
so you drop some serious gems, and I think you sort of mentioned it in passing, but UVCeed is a product people can get on Amazon. Like
that is. Yeah, I tried to drop that a few times.
Yeah. That's cool,
one more time as well.
Why not more time?
And that's been great. I mean, it's one of those that, every time we do another project or a new spin out, you learn just a little bit more on the idea from ideation to sales. And that one's been a real fun one and a real educational one. If, like you said, on Amazon, you can see it, but for us, it's taught a lot, because we've spun out, I think, about 9 companies out of our incubator. And the way we've done stuff in the past, we have intellectual property in like surgical robotics. But when you're a surgical robotic, company, we don't manufacture robots. On something like that, we come up with, the underlying technology from a medical aspect, and we make sure we have patent protection, and then you partner with a surgical robotic company, to have, part of what you did gets integrated into another system. And UVCeed was very interesting for us as a company, because, often we don't get to go from idea to, being on online sales all at once. And so that one was real fun for us, because I got to we thought of it, we prototyped, we built it, set up factory, go through the regulatory, go to production, sales, distribution, and we got to do each one of those steps. But everyone who's doing a startup, you'll learn something every time, and the more you get to watch other people, or the more you get to do it, the more you learn, and we learned a lot on that one. It was much different from, like I say, a surgical robotic or an implant that goes in your head. But each one that you do, you take a little nugget of information, and then you can apply that to the next thing, and so the UVCeed is much different from Realeve. And there's the standard sort of day-to-day business stuff that's boring, that no one wants to deal with, and that's always the same. But there are a lot of similarities when you're taking an idea that that no one has made before and trying to get it over that finish line. There's a lot of stuff that you that are similar. All of these things, the people who are listening, they may be doing anything from a vending machine startup to I don't know, maybe Elon Musk is listening on his Neuralink.
Right.
But even though they're all real different and they have different technical hurdles, there's still that same, you still have to have that same drive to go from idea, to being able to hold something. It's a process, and it's a rewarding process at times. It's a frustrating process a lot, but it's something that hopefully podcasts like yours and other people who have stuff, these communities now where people share this information, sort of a great resource. I think that learning from other people's successes and failures is a great thing.
100%. Like I said, the gems you've dropped in this conversation alone, for anybody who's even remotely considering stepping into a field akin to sort of where you're at right now, if you don't have those and you would have started a startup, the amount of money it would have cost you, you could have just saved yourself some time by listening to an hour podcast. You know what I mean? Like, it's really that simple these days. Again, we have access to data today, and we either choose to use it or not. That's truly, I think, one of the lessons here. It's like you said, we got this product full cycle from development, research to actual in the shelves for people to purchase. What that does now is give you more data to inform when you're throwing ideas around and looking at your pipeline of technology. You're like, we could actually take this to market now. We know that. Not just the whole team really knows this. We can get it going. We've done it before. We can build it better, faster, stronger. I'm all for it, man. I think this has been a really exhilarating conversation. The real question is, with the red carpet rolled out, like, what do you want the listeners to do? Is there a website specifically? Should they be going to the Benuti Technologies website?
Yeah, I mean, if anybody's interested in the Benuti Technologies, I mean, that we have a ton of websites. We have a plethora. But no, so Benuti Technologies, which is the longest domain that is hard to remember for anyone. That's why we picked it. I'm kidding. But it's BONUTTI technologies.com. I'm sure there'll be a link. And that one's just really our sort of our landing page for all of us. The two that we talked the most about, is UVCeed. That's UVCeed.com. That's the germicidal disinfectant product we talked about. It's available for purchase on there or on Amazon, or people who are interested in Realeve. That's not a device that is anything you can go out and buy.
A little different, yeah.
But for people who are interested in what we're doing and where we're trying to go on that, that's at Realeve, REALEVE.net. And so that one's out there as well. All of them are linked off of the Benuti Technology site. But if anybody's interested in any of those, it's an area to take a look at, and you can read a little bit more and see where we're at, or see where we hope to end up.
Right on. Well, Justin, man, I can't thank you enough for breaking it down, taking it easy on me on the tech, the technical terms, I should say. The SPG is I'll be referring to it moving forward, because spinopalatine ganglion, just, it's a little heavy.
You nailed it, though. You nailed it.
I was taking a risk, you see. I was an entrepreneur. I had data points. I took the risk. No. I truly enjoyed the conversation, man, and I appreciate that you stopped by.
Yeah, thanks for having me.